I'm Amelia Whitmore, 17, and if you looked at my family from the outside, you'd think we had everything figured out. Our house sits in Riverview Heights, one of those suburbs where the lawns are perpetually green and the driveways showcase cars that cost more than most people's annual salaries. My father, Robert, made his fortune in tech consulting, and my mother, Dr. Patricia Whitmore, runs one of the most successful pediatric practices in the city. On paper, we're the American dream. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But behind our perfectly manicured exterior, I've always been the shadow in my family spotlight. While my younger sister Sophia commands attention simply by existing, I've learned to blend into the background, keeping my head down and my grades up, hoping that someday excellence might earn me the recognition that seems to come so naturally to her. The dining room of our colonial-style home buzzed with typical evening chaos when everything started to unravel. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over our mahogany table, set with china that cost more than some families' monthly rent. Mrs. Elena Rosales, our housekeeper of 8 years, moved quietly around us, refilling water glasses and pretending not to hear the family dynamics that had become as predictable as clockwork. The florals for the centerpieces need to be perfect, my mother was saying, her manicured fingers tapping against her tablet screen as she scrolled through vendor photos. I'm thinking white roses with gold accents. It needs to scream elegance, not tacky nouveau riche. Sophia, perched in her chair like the princess she'd always been treated as, nodded enthusiastically. What about those crystal garlands we saw at the Hendersons' anniversary party? Chad said they looked amazing in photos. My father barely looked up from his phone, probably reviewing quarterly reports even during dinner. Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart. Just keep Patricia updated on the budget. The budget, $50,000 for a single night celebration. I knew because I'd overheard their heated discussion about it 3 weeks ago, when my mother insisted that anything less would be social suicide in our circle. The same amount that could cover 2 years of college tuition was being spent on one party for a 15-year-old. Amelia, you've been awfully quiet, my mother observed, finally acknowledging my presence at the table. Don't you have anything to contribute to your sister's big day? I set down my fork, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach that seemed to tighten whenever family conversations turned to Sophia's endless celebrations. I was actually hoping we could talk about my college applications. The early decision deadline for Northwestern is next week, and I still need… Northwestern? My father's eyebrows shot up. That's expensive, Amelia. Have you considered state schools? They're much more practical. The irony wasn't lost on me. Practical, from the man who just approved a 5-figure party budget without blinking. But Dad, my SAT scores are in the 99th percentile, and my GPA… Honey, my mother interrupted, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted to sound supportive while completely dismissing me. College applications are important, but they can wait. Your sister's Sweet 16 is in 3 weeks, and there are still a million details to coordinate. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Sophia shot me what might have been an apologetic look, but it was fleeting. She was too caught up in her mother's attention to dwell on my disappointment. Speaking of details, my mother continued, pulling up her color-coded planning spreadsheet, we need to confirm the final head count with the caterers tomorrow. Sophia, did Chad's parents RSVP? Of course they did. Chad's mom said she's never seen such beautiful invitations. The gold foiling was definitely worth the extra cost. As they continued planning, I felt that nagging ache in my lower abdomen that had been bothering me for the past few days. I'd attributed it to stress. Between AP classes, SAT prep, and college applications, my schedule was relentless. The pain was probably just my body's way of telling me to slow down. Mrs. Rosales appeared beside me with a fresh glass of water, and I caught her eye for just a moment. In that brief exchange, I saw something that looked like sympathy. She'd been with our family long enough to witness the pattern. Sophia's needs always came first. My achievements were acknowledged with distracted nods, and family resources flowed toward whatever would enhance our social standing. The dress fitting is tomorrow at 3, my mother announced, making notes on her tablet. Sophia, make sure you eat light tomorrow. We can't have any last-minute alterations. What about you, Amelia? Sophia asked suddenly. Are you going to get a new dress for the party? The question caught me off guard. In all the planning, no one had actually asked if I wanted to attend my sister's party, much less what I'd wear to it. "I have that navy dress from last year's spring formal," I said quietly. My mother looked up sharply. "Navy? To a gold and white themed party? Absolutely not. We'll pick something up for you this weekend. Something appropriate." Appropriate. The conversation moved on to party favors and photographers, while I sat there feeling increasingly invisible. This was nothing new. I'd spent 17 years learning to occupy as little space as possible in my family's emotional landscape. But tonight, the familiar sting felt sharper somehow. As Mrs. Rosales began clearing the table, I excused myself and headed upstairs to my room. The hallway walls were lined with family photos, a visual timeline of our lives that told the story of my family's priorities. Sophia's dance recitals, her middle school graduation, her 15th birthday party. I appeared in maybe a quarter of the frames, usually in the background or cropped to fit around Sophia's central position. My room was my sanctuary, the one space in the house that felt truly mine. Unlike Sophia's Instagram-worthy bedroom with its designer furniture and professional organization, my space was practical and lived in. My desk overflowed with textbooks and college brochures, my walls were covered with academic achievement certificates, and a few photos with my best friend Marcus. I settled at my desk and opened my laptop, trying to focus on my Northwestern application essay. The prompt asked about overcoming challenges, and I found myself staring at the blank page, unsure how to articulate the particular challenge of being exceptional in a family that only noticed mediocrity wrapped in the right packaging. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "How'd the family dinner go? Did they finally notice you're basically a genius?" I smiled despite myself. Marcus Johnson had been my closest friend since freshman year, when we'd been paired for a chemistry project. His family was nothing like mine. Middle class, loud, chaotic, and overflowing with genuine affection. I'd spent countless dinners at the Johnson house, watching his parents actually listen to each other and celebrate even small achievements with authentic enthusiasm. "Same as always," I texted back. Sophia's party planning took precedence over everything else. "Wanna come over? Mom made her famous chalk chip cookies, and she's been asking about your college apps." The invitation was tempting, but the pain in my abdomen had intensified while I'd been sitting. I shifted in my chair, trying to find a comfortable position, and felt a sharp twinge that made me gasp softly. "Rain check? Not feeling great tonight. Everything okay?" I hesitated before responding. The pain was probably nothing. Stress, too much caffeine, irregular eating habits during busy periods. The last thing I wanted was to add unnecessary drama to my family's already complicated dynamics. "Just tired. Talk tomorrow." As I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in my dresser mirror. I looked tired, probably from the stress of managing schoolwork while watching my family pour their energy into Sophia's social calendar. The girl staring back at me had learned to expect very little from her family and had built her identity around being self-sufficient. Down the hall, I could hear my mother on a phone call with someone about party logistics, her voice animated in a way it never was when discussing my achievements. Sophia's laughter drifted from her room, probably on FaceTime with Chad or one of her friends, sharing photos of dress options or party inspiration. I pulled out an old photo hidden in my desk drawer, a picture of me with my paternal grandmother, Lily, taken 3 years ago, before the family rift that had cut her out of our lives. She'd been the one person who seemed to see me clearly, who celebrated my academic victories with genuine pride, and who had always made me feel like I mattered. But after a confrontation with my parents about their obvious favoritism towards Sophia, Grandma Lily had been essentially excommunicated from family gatherings. The pain in my abdomen pulsed again, stronger this time, and I made a mental note to mention it to my mother tomorrow. As a pediatrician, she'd probably have some practical advice about stress-related symptoms. But knowing my family's current priorities, I'd have to find the right moment between party planning sessions. As I drifted off to sleep, I had no idea that this nagging pain would soon expose the true depths of my family's dysfunction and force choices that would change everything. 3 weeks before Sophia's party, my world had narrowed to a brutal routine of AP classes, SAT prep, and college applications. The pain in my abdomen had become a constant companion, sharp enough to make me pause during lectures, but not severe enough to disrupt my carefully maintained schedule. I'd learned to manage it with over-the-counter pain relievers and deep breathing exercises between classes. The morning of Sophia's dress fitting, I woke up feeling like someone had spent the night twisting a knife in my lower right side. I sat on the edge of my bed, waiting for the wave of nausea to pass, and checked my phone to find 17 missed notifications about party planning in the family group chat. Dress fitting moved to 2 p.m., my mother had texted. Photographer wants to do some test shots with the birthday girl. I scrolled through the messages, watching my family coordinate around Sophia's schedule with military precision. No one had mentioned the SAT prep session I'd scheduled for this afternoon, or the fact that I'd planned to spend the evening working on my college essays. In the kitchen, Mrs. Rosales was preparing breakfast, while my mother paced near the window, already dressed in one of her designer suits despite it being Saturday. "Mija," Mrs. Rosales said quietly as I reached for a piece of toast, "you look pale. Are you feeling well?" Her concern caught me off guard. Mrs. Rosales had always been kind, but she maintained careful boundaries in our household. She'd learned, like I had, that drawing attention to problems the family didn't want to acknowledge was rarely welcome. "Just tired," I managed, though the smell of bacon was making my stomach churn. My mother looked up from her phone. "Amelia, I need you to pick up the party favors from the boutique downtown. Sophia and I will be busy with the dress fitting, and your father is playing golf with the Hendersons." "I actually have SAT prep this afternoon," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing pain, "and I really need to finish my Northwestern essay tonight." "The SAT can wait," my mother replied without looking up. "This is more important." More important. My future college prospects were less important than picking up gift bags for a party? "Mom, I started to protest, but was cut off by a particularly sharp stab of pain that made me gasp and grab the counter for support. Mrs. Rosales moved toward me immediately. "Amelia, what's wrong?" "Nothing," I said quickly, shooting a glance at my mother, who was still focused on her phone. "Just a cramp." But Mrs. Rosales had been around long enough to recognize the difference between nothing and something that needed attention. She studied my face with the kind of maternal concern I rarely received from my actual mother. "Where does it hurt?" she asked softly. I hesitated, then pointed to my lower right abdomen. The pain had been getting progressively worse over the past week, but I'd convinced myself it was stress-related. Between maintaining my 4.0 GPA and watching my family's resources flow towards Sophia's social calendar, stress seemed like the most logical explanation. Mrs. Rosales frowned. "How long has this been bothering you?" "A few days," I admitted quietly, hoping my mother wouldn't overhear and add it to her growing list of things I was doing to complicate party planning. "Mom, Patricia," Mrs. Rosales called to my mother, "I think Amelia needs to see a doctor." My mother finally looked up, her expression more annoyed than concerned. "What's wrong now?" "She's having abdominal pain," Mrs. Rosales explained. "It seems serious." "It's probably just stress," my mother said dismissively. "Amelia tends to be dramatic during busy periods. Remember how she claimed she had mono during Sophia's last birthday party?" I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. I'd actually had mono during Sophia's 14th birthday, but the family narrative had transformed my legitimate illness into attention-seeking behavior because it had inconveniently coincided with party preparations. "This feels different," I said quietly. "Different how?" my mother asked, but her tone suggested she was already searching for reasons to dismiss my concerns. I tried to describe the pain, the sharp, constant ache that seemed to be getting worse rather than better, but before I could finish, Sophia bounced into the kitchen wearing one of her new designer outfits. "Mom, are you ready? The boutique said we need to be there early if we want time for photos before other appointments." And just like that, my mother's attention shifted completely. "Of course, sweetheart, let me grab my purse." The pain chose that moment to spike again, and I couldn't suppress a small cry. Mrs. Rosales immediately moved to support me, but my mother was already heading toward the door with Sophia. "Amelia, just rest today," my mother called over her shoulder, "and don't forget about the party favors. They close at 6. As they left, Mrs. Rosales helped me to a chair and brought me a glass of water. The kitchen felt eerily quiet after the chaos of party planning. "This is not normal," she said firmly. "You need medical attention." I wanted to agree with her, but I'd spent 17 years learning that my needs always came second to family image management. "My mom's a doctor. If it was serious, she'd—" "Your mother is too distracted to see what's right in front of her," Mrs. Rosales interrupted gently. "When was the last time she actually looked at you? Really looked at you?" The question hit harder than the physical pain.
I couldn't remember the last time my mother had given me her full attention, the way she automatically did with Sophia. My phone rang, and I saw Marcus's name on the screen. I answered, trying to keep my voice normal. "Hey, what's up? Just checking if you're still coming to prep today. Mrs. Henderson is covering some brutal math concepts, and you know I can't survive without my study buddy." I glanced at Mrs. Rosales, who was watching me with obvious concern. "I might have to reschedule. I'm not feeling great." What kind of not feeling great? Like regular sick or something worse? Marcus knew me well enough to recognize when I was downplaying problems. I'd spent years minimizing my needs to avoid adding complications to my family's carefully orchestrated life. "I've been having some abdominal pain," I admitted. "It's probably nothing, but..." "Dude, that doesn't sound like nothing. Have you seen a doctor?" "My mom thinks it's stress." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Marcus had witnessed enough family dynamics at the Whitmore house to understand the subtext. "What do you think it is?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but it's getting worse." After I hung up, Mrs. Rosales sat down across from me at the kitchen island. Her expression was serious in a way I'd rarely seen during her 8 years with our family. "Amelia," she said carefully, "I've been working for your family for a long time. I've watched you grow up, and I've seen how hard you work to be perfect, to not cause problems." I nodded, unsure where she was going with this. "But sometimes," she continued, "not causing problems means ignoring things that need attention, and I think this pain needs attention." That evening, while my family celebrated the success of Sophia's dress fitting with takeout from their favorite expensive restaurant, I lay in my room trying to find a position that didn't make the pain worse. My Northwestern essay sat unfinished on my laptop, the party favors remained uncollected downtown, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I hadn't seen in months, but immediately recognized: Grandma Lily. "How are you doing, sweetheart? I know it's been a while since we talked." I stared at the message for a long time. After the family rift 3 years ago, communication with my grandmother had become an act of quiet rebellion. My parents had made it clear that maintaining contact with her was disloyal and disruptive to family harmony. But lying there in pain, feeling more isolated than ever, I found myself typing back, "Not great, actually. Been having some health issues, but everyone's too busy with Sophia's party to notice." Her response came quickly. "What kind of health issues? Are you getting proper medical care?" For the first time all day, someone was asking the right questions. Someone was treating my pain as legitimate rather than inconvenient. "Abdominal pain that's getting worse. Mom thinks it's stress and drama." That doesn't sound like stress to me. Can you describe the pain? As I texted with my grandmother, explaining the location and intensity of my symptoms, I realized I was receiving more medical attention from a retired nurse via text message than I'd gotten from my pediatrician mother all week. "Amelia," she texted, "those symptoms could indicate several serious conditions. You need to see a doctor immediately." "Everyone's too busy right now." "Then we make them unbusy. This is your health we're talking about." Down the hall, I could hear my parents discussing flower arrangements for the party, their voices animated and excited. The contrast between their energy for party planning and their dismissive attitude toward my pain crystallized something I'd been avoiding acknowledging. In my family, my well-being simply wasn't a priority. As I drifted off to sleep that night, the pain was worse than ever, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening to me was going to force my family to confront some uncomfortable truths about their priorities.
1 week before Sophia's Sweet 16, I was hunched over my AP chemistry exam when the pain that had been building for days suddenly exploded into something I couldn't ignore. The pencil slipped from my fingers as a wave of agony tore through my lower abdomen, so intense that black spots danced at the edges of my vision. "Miss Whitmore?" Mr. Patterson's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" I tried to respond, tried to explain that I was fine, just stressed, just being dramatic like my mother always said. But when I attempted to sit up straighter, the pain hit again with such force that I doubled over, my chair clattering to the floor as I collapsed. The last thing I remembered was the sound of my classmates gasping and Mr. Patterson shouting for someone to call 911. I woke up in the emergency room to the harsh fluorescent lights and the steady beeping of medical equipment. My mouth felt like cotton, and there was an IV in my left arm.
A kind-faced man in scrubs was standing beside my bed, reviewing a chart. "Amelia, I'm Dr. James Kim. You're at Riverside Medical Center. Do you remember what happened?" "Chemistry," I managed, my voice hoarse. Pain got really bad. Dr. Kim nodded. "We've run some tests, and I need to explain what we found. You have a large ovarian cyst that has twisted, cutting off blood supply to your ovary. This is called ovarian torsion, and it's a medical emergency." The words hit me like a physical blow. Medical emergency. Not stress, not drama, not attention-seeking behavior. A real, serious medical condition that required immediate treatment. "We've called your parents," Dr. Kim continued. "They should be here soon. In the meantime, I need you to know that you're going to need surgery, likely within the next 24 to 48 hours. Surgery. The word echoed in my head as nurses move around me, checking vital signs and adjusting IV drips. This was real. This was serious. And my parents were going to have to acknowledge that their dismissal of my pain had been completely wrong. When my parents burst through the emergency room doors 20 minutes later, my mother's first words weren't about my condition or my pain. They were about timing. "How long will she need to be in the hospital?" she asked Dr. Kim, barely glancing at me on the gurney. "We have a major family event this weekend." Dr. Kim's expression shifted slightly, the professional mask slipping just enough to reveal surprise. "Mrs. Whitmore, your daughter has a serious medical condition that requires emergency surgery. The timing of family events isn't really the primary concern here." My father, who had been silent since arriving, finally stepped forward. "What exactly are we looking at in terms of recovery time?" "Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Kim said slowly, as if speaking to someone who wasn't quite grasping the situation, "your daughter could lose her ovary if we don't operate soon. We're talking about her future fertility, her immediate health and safety. Recovery time varies, but she'll need several days in the hospital and weeks of restricted activity." I watched the exchange from my hospital bed, feeling surreal disconnection from my own medical crisis. My parents were discussing my emergency surgery like it was a scheduling conflict. "Patricia," my father said quietly, "what about Sophia's party?" "I know," my mother replied, her voice tight with stress. "We can't possibly cancel now. Do you have any idea how much money we've already spent? The deposits alone." Dr. Kim looked between my parents with growing disbelief. "I'm sorry, but are you suggesting that a party takes precedence over your daughter's emergency surgery?" "You don't understand," my mother said quickly. "This isn't just any party. We've been planning this for months. The entire community is expecting." "Mom," I interrupted weakly, "I'm scared." For a moment, silence fell over the small emergency room bay. My mother looked at me for the first time since arriving, and I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or recognition that she'd been treating my medical emergency as an inconvenience. But the moment passed quickly. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she said, in the tone she used for difficult patients at her practice. "We'll figure something out." Dr. Kim stepped closer to my bed, his expression having shifted from professional concern to something approaching anger. "Amelia, I want you to understand what's happening to you. The cyst on your ovary has twisted, which is cutting off blood flow. If we don't operate soon, you could lose the ovary entirely. This could affect your ability to have children someday." The gravity of his words hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about pain or missing school or inconveniencing my family's social calendar. This was about my future, my body, my life. "How soon do you need to operate?" I asked. "Ideally, within the next 12 hours, no later than 48 hours. I looked at my parents, who were now having a whispered conversation near the foot of my bed. I caught fragments. "Can't cancel now. What will people think? Maybe we can delay." "You want to delay my surgery?" I asked, my voice stronger than I'd expected. My mother's face flushed slightly. "Amelia, you don't understand the complexity of the situation. This party isn't just important to Sophia, it's important to our entire family's reputation in the community." "Your reputation is more important than my ovary?" The bluntness of my question seemed to shock everyone in the room, including myself. I'd spent 17 years avoiding direct confrontation, learning to minimize my needs to avoid family conflict. But lying in a hospital bed, facing surgery, something had shifted. Dr. Kim stepped forward again. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, I need to be very clear about something. Your daughter's condition is serious. Ovarian torsion doesn't wait for convenient timing. If you delay this surgery to accommodate social events, you're risking permanent damage to her reproductive system." Before my parents could respond, Marcus and his mother, Janet Johnson, appeared in the doorway. Marcus's face was pale with worry, and Mrs. Johnson immediately moved to my bedside. "Oh, honey," she said, "how are you feeling?" "Scared," I admitted, and for the first time all day, felt like my feelings were being acknowledged as valid. "We came as soon as we heard. Is there anything you need?" The contrast between the Johnson family's immediate, genuine concern and my own parents' focus on party logistics was stark enough that even Dr. Kim seemed to notice. He glanced between the two sets of adults, his expression increasingly troubled. "Amelia needs surgery," Janet Johnson said firmly, looking directly at my parents. "Everything else can wait." "You don't understand," my mother replied, her voice defensive. "We have obligations." "You have a daughter in the hospital," Mrs. Johnson interrupted. "That's your only obligation right now." As the adults continued their tense exchange, I felt the pain spike again, reminding me that while they argued about priorities and obligations, my body was literally fighting for survival. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years trying to be the perfect, undemanding daughter, and now that I genuinely needed my parents' support, they were treating my medical emergency as an inconvenience to their social calendar. Sophia appeared in the doorway, looking smaller and more uncertain than I'd seen her in years. She'd been crying, and when she saw me connected to IV lines and monitors, fresh tears started flowing. "Amelia," she whispered, approaching my bed cautiously. "Are you going to be okay?" "I hope so," I said honestly. For the first time in our relationship, I saw real fear in my sister's eyes. Not fear of missing out on her party, but genuine terror at the possibility of losing me. It was a glimpse of the sister I'd always hoped existed beneath the spoiled princess facade our parents had cultivated. "The party doesn't matter," Sophia said suddenly, turning to our parents. "Cancel it. Amelia's more important." My mother's face went white. "Sophia, you don't mean that. You've been looking forward to this for months." "I mean it," Sophia said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "She's my sister." As my family continued to debate my medical future, Dr. Kim made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his phone and placed a call that I couldn't quite hear, but his tone was urgent and professional. When he finished, he turned back to my parents with an expression that broke no argument. "Mrs. Whitmore, as a medical professional yourself, I'm sure you understand that patient care takes precedence over social obligations. Your daughter needs surgery, and she needs it now." The weight of his words settled over the room like a blanket. The choice was being made for them, but I could see in my parents' faces that they weren't relieved to have the decision taken out of their hands. They were calculating, weighing the social cost of canceling Sophia's party against the medical necessity of my surgery. And in that moment, I realized that my health crisis wasn't going to bring my family together. It was going to expose just how deep the dysfunction ran. The consultation room felt suffocating as Dr. Amanda Rodriguez explained my surgery options. My parents sat rigidly in plastic chairs, while I lay connected to monitors that beeped steadily, marking time toward my inevitable operation. The surgery needs to happen within 48 hours. Saturday morning would be ideal, given the progression of symptoms. My mother's face went ashen. "Doctor, is there any way we could schedule this for Monday? We have a significant family commitment this weekend that simply cannot be rescheduled."
Dr. Rodriguez's eyebrows shot up. "Mrs. Whitmore, we're talking about your daughter's ovary. Waiting until Monday could result in permanent damage or loss of the organ entirely." "I understand the medical implications," my mother replied stiffly, "but you don't understand the social implications. We've invested $50,000 in this event. Our entire community will be there." The room fell silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of my heart monitor, which seemed to be accelerating. I stared at my mother, unable to process what I was hearing. She was negotiating with my surgeon about delaying emergency surgery to save a party. "Patricia," my father said quietly, "maybe we should consider postponing." "Absolutely not," she snapped. Do you have any idea what canceling would do to our reputation? To Sophia's social standing? We'd be social pariahs. Dr. Rodriguez looked between my parents with obvious disgust. I've been practicing medicine for 15 years, and I have never encountered parents who would prioritize a social event over their child's emergency surgery. You don't understand our situation, my mother said defensively. Then explain it to me, Dr. Rodriguez challenged. Explain how a party is more important than your daughter's reproductive health. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Mrs. Rosales appeared in the doorway. She'd been standing outside, having driven to the hospital after hearing about my collapse. Her face was grim as she took in the scene. "Excuse me," she said quietly, "but I couldn't help overhearing. Are you seriously considering delaying Amelia's surgery for a party?" "Elena, this doesn't concern you," my mother said sharply. "This absolutely concerns me," Mrs. Rosales replied, stepping into the room. "I've watched this family for 8 years, and I've seen how Amelia has been treated. But this is beyond anything I imagined." My father finally spoke up. "We're not saying we won't have the surgery. We're just exploring options for timing." "There are no options," Dr. Rodriguez said flatly. "Your daughter needs surgery now. Not Monday, not next week, now." I watched my parents exchange looks, having an entire conversation without words. In that moment, I saw their choice clearly written on their faces. The party, their image, their social standing, their perfect facade mattered more than my health. "Fine," my mother said finally. "Schedule the surgery for Saturday morning. But we'll need to discuss arrangements for recovery that don't interfere with our evening plans." The words hit me like a physical blow. Even while agreeing to the surgery, she was already calculating how to minimize its impact on Sophia's celebration. Dr. Rodriguez stood abruptly. "I'll be back with the surgical consent forms. And, Mrs. Whitmore, I strongly suggest you reconsider your priorities before your daughter realizes just how little she matters to you." After she left, the room was silent, except for my quiet crying. Mrs. Rosales moved to my bedside and took my hand, while my parents sat frozen in their chairs, unable or unwilling to acknowledge what had just happened. "It's going to be okay, mija," Mrs. Rosales whispered. "You're going to be okay." But as I looked at my parents' faces, calculating, distant, unchanged, I knew that regardless of how the surgery went, nothing would ever be okay again. Alone in my hospital bed after my parents left to handle party logistics, I made a decision that would change everything. With shaking fingers, I dialed the number I'd memorized but hadn't used in 3 years. "Grandma Lily?" My voice cracked as soon as she answered. "Amelia, sweetheart, what's wrong?" Through tears, I explained everything: the pain, the diagnosis, the surgery, and most devastatingly, my parents' reaction. "Those idiots," she said finally, her voice filled with quiet fury. "I'm coming. Don't you worry about anything else." "You don't have to." "Like hell I don't. You're my granddaughter, and if my son and that woman he married can't prioritize your health, then I will." 4 hours later, Grandma Lily swept into my hospital room like a force of nature. At 72, she moved with the purposeful energy of someone who'd spent decades as a nurse and had no patience for nonsense. She was tall and silver-haired, wearing the practical clothes of someone who prioritized function over fashion. "Let me look at you," she said, immediately taking my hand and checking my color, my responsiveness, my overall condition with professional efficiency. "How's the pain?" "Better with the medication," I said, already feeling calmer just having her there. "Good. Now, where are your parents?" "At home, getting ready for some pre-party event." Her expression darkened. "Of course they are." Dr. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, having heard that I had a new visitor. "You must be family. I'm Dr. Rodriguez, Amelia's surgeon." "Lily Chen," my grandmother said, standing to shake her hand. "I'm this child's grandmother, and apparently the only relative who gives a damn about her welfare." Dr. Rodriguez's expression shifted to one of interest. "Mrs. Chen, I have to ask, are you aware of how your son and daughter-in-law have been handling Amelia's medical crisis?"
I'm aware, Grandma Lily said grimly, and I'm here to ensure it doesn't continue. They stepped outside to talk privately, and I could hear snippets of their conversation through the door. Words like medical advocacy and patient rights and alternative guardianship drifted back to me. When they returned, Grandma Lily was carrying paperwork. Amelia, I've spoken with Dr. Rodriguez about becoming your medical advocate for the surgery. If you agree, I'll be the one making decisions about your care, not your parents. You can do that? I can and I will. Your parents have proven they can't put your health first, so I'm removing that responsibility from them. As if summoned by some cosmic irony, my parents chose that moment to arrive, looking harried and annoyed. They stopped short when they saw Grandma Lily standing beside my bed. Mother, my father said carefully, what are you doing here? Taking care of my granddaughter since you apparently can't be bothered? That's not fair, my mother protested. We're handling this appropriately. Grandma Lily turned to face them both, and I saw the full force of her protective fury. Appropriately? You mean scheduling your daughter's emergency surgery around a party? Discussing recovery timelines in terms of how they'll affect your social calendar? You don't understand the complexities, my mother began. I understand perfectly, Grandma Lily interrupted. I understand that you've prioritized your image over your child's health. I understand that you've made a 17-year-old girl feel like her medical emergency is an inconvenience. My father tried to interject. Mother, we're doing our best. Your best? Grandma Lily's voice rose. Your best would be canceling that ridiculous party and focusing on your daughter. Your best would be staying here tonight instead of going to some pre-party cocktail hour. We have obligations, my mother said stiffly. You have a daughter in the hospital, Grandma Lily shot back. That's your only obligation. The argument continued, but I found myself focusing on something else entirely. For the first time in my life, someone was fighting for me. Someone was putting my needs first, defending my worth, making me feel like I mattered. Dr. Rodriguez returned with the completed paperwork. It's settled. Mrs. Chen will be Amelia's primary medical contact for the surgery. My parents looked stunned. In trying to maintain control over both my medical care and their social calendar, they'd lost control of both. As they left, to attend the cocktail party, of course, Grandma Lily settled into the chair beside my bed. Get some rest, she said gently. Tomorrow, we're going to fix you up, and then we're going to fix a lot of other things too. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. Saturday morning arrived with the sterile efficiency of the operating room. As I was wheeled into surgery, Grandma Lily squeezed my hand and promised she'd be waiting when I woke up. Through the fog of anesthesia, I heard Dr. Rodriguez explaining the procedure to someone, probably a resident, and felt oddly comforted knowing I was in capable hands. Meanwhile, across town, Sophia's Sweet 16 was beginning with all the fanfare my mother had orchestrated. The country club had been transformed into a golden wonderland, with elaborate floral arrangements and a professional photographer capturing every detail. Sophia looked beautiful in her custom dress, but even through her makeup, the stress of the morning showed. I woke up in recovery to find Grandma Lily reading beside my bed, along with Marcus and his entire family. They'd brought balloons and flowers, creating a small celebration around my successful surgery. How do you feel? Grandma Lily asked, immediately checking my color and responsiveness with practiced ease. Tired, but better, I said honestly. The constant pain that had plagued me for weeks was finally gone. Dr. Rodriguez said the surgery went perfectly, Marcus said, grinning with relief. They saved the ovary and removed the cyst. You're going to be completely fine. Mrs. Johnson had brought homemade soup and magazines, treating my recovery like the important event it was. The contrast with my own family's priorities wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Where are my parents? I asked, though I already knew the answer. At the party, Grandma Lily said quietly. They called to check on you, but when I told them the surgery was successful, they said they'd visit later. Later, after the party. As the afternoon wore on, updates from Sophia's celebration began filtering through social media. What should have been a triumphant event was becoming increasingly uncomfortable as word spread about my surgery and my parents' choice. Chad Morrison, Sophia's boyfriend, had apparently decided he'd had enough. Marcus showed me his Instagram story where Chad had posted a picture of the elaborate party with the caption, "Amazing what $50,000 can buy."